Welcome to the Love What You Do podcast. I'm Kelly Dugan, former HR executive turned career coach and personal brand expert, and I'm here each episode helping to give you tips and strategies to discover your unique value, leverage your personal brand, and create a career you love. Welcome back to the podcast, everyone. I am so excited to have a guest with us here today. I know you're used to just seeing me, but today we are welcoming Daryl Twitchell to the podcast. Welcome, Daryl. So happy to have you here.
Hi, Kelly, and hello, everyone. I'm happy to be here.
Yes, absolutely. So Daryl is the founder and managing partner of Silver Ridge Advisors, which is a management consultancy that he actually started in 2008. And Daryl, you and I have known each other now for a number of years. I can't believe how long it's been, actually.
Yeah, we do actually
Um,
go back a ways now when we think about it.
I know. We crossed paths at
Yep.
WWE. You came in to do some management consulting, specifically in the HR and culture space. And we just had a ball getting to build out all sorts of different people strategies and grow the function at WWE over a number of years, and even got to build a building together in that
Oh,
time.
yeah, that was in
Yes.
2016, I believe. It was the first time we started working together. So, yeah, going on 10 years
That
now
is,
that I've known
Daryl, that's scary.
you. And I've seen you grow and blossom, and hopefully you've seen me as well, but we'll see.
Vice versa for sure. And I have to tell everyone that you've been such a mentor of mine on my personal
Well,
journey
thank you.
from going from a corporate career into working in HR consulting now and career coaching. And you were one of the first examples that I had in my life of, someone who was actually being successful and being their own boss in a consultancy role that I had been so close with. Because and as I've shared on the podcast before, I had always known that I had this inkling to want to go into entrepreneurship, to go into consulting, to go into coaching. But it was kind of this thing where I was like, but nobody actually does that, right? Like that, how are people actually successful doing that? And then I got to meet Daryl and hear about what we're going to be talking about today, which is how you built SRA, and really built a career that you love. And it was inspirational to me to know that that was something that I could do too. So I'm very excited to dive into this conversation
Well,
today.
that's so nice of you to say. I mean, it is definitely something that, well, when I tell the story, you'll hear that it's not something I planned from the get-go, that my life would look like right now. We're working in SRA and doing this kind of work, but fortuitously, it kind of worked out that way. And I do get to meet a lot of wonderful people like you in the job that I do now. But specifically about the kind of work that we do, we want to be
Mhm.
seen as colleagues to the companies that we work with. And so hopefully in 2016, when I came in and I started working with you, yeah, I was an outsider initially, but I think very quickly that sort of external perception disappeared, I hope. And I
Oh
was
yeah.
seen and we were all seen as colleagues working together, really with no difference between being an outside consultant versus being an employee of the company.
You're so incredibly right. And I think that is more rare than you would think when you're working with outside consultants. I think that's one of the things that you and your team really bring to the table is that being able to embed culturally and just on a personal note to get to know people and really feel like a colleague. And
Mhm.
one of the things you just shared around how you never thought you'd be at
Yeah.
this point. We're gonna hear the whole story of how you got to this point, but I that's one of the things that I share with my career coaching clients all the time. I say careers only make sense looking in reverse.
Hmm.
Like you have no idea how every decision that you make and every step you take is going to shape where you end up going. And until you're at the end and you're looking backwards and you're like, wow, had this not happened, it wouldn't have opened this door to send me to this opportunity. And that's where I completely geek out of the over all of these things, and why I'm so excited to talk to you today around your career story and how you broke into consulting.
Sure. So why don't I give you the sort of quick story of what happened to create SRA, and then I'll go back further and give you the context of how that came about. So
That sounds awesome.
in 2008, um, I was working in a very different kind of role at a company called Lehman Brothers, which many of your listeners, I'm sure, have heard of. It was a well-known investment bank, right? Global bank.
Yeah.
I was actually a principal investor, meaning I was running a fund at the bank using the balance sheet of the bank to invest in different kinds of asset managers and other investment and financial companies. Things were going very
Hmm.
well. Stock was going higher and higher every day, until one day when I was called in and we were notified that actually the business was going to be shutting down. So in
Wow.
2008, as everyone may recall, if we go back in history, there was a fateful day when the company went bankrupt, and I was one of the many people carrying a box out the door with all of my belongings the same morning I came in with no notice at all. So
Wow.
if you remember around that time, Merrill Lynch had a similar thing happen, Bear Stearns had a similar thing happen, Countrywide, a number of other companies were all going through this in 2008. And so it wasn't a great time to say, hey, I'm going to go and interview and find another job, especially in financial services. And so
Hmm.
when I started comparing notes that same day with some of my previous colleagues from different jobs, we all came to realize, maybe we should try to take our fate in our own hands and see what happens. And what I mean by that is like we hung up a shingle, and the shingle was essentially to say to the world, we are consultants available for hire. Now,
Hmm.
that wasn't something we had planned to do for years. This was just an
Hmm.
opportunistic thing because we realized finding a traditional W2 job was going to be difficult. So let's try to find a way to sell services and do project work until the
Hmm.
world came back and things were looking better. We were
Yeah.
very fortunate. So I got together with a couple of my former colleagues. We ended up getting a client quite quickly because at the time, banks were taking TARP money. I don't know if that rings a bell, but essentially it was a short-term bailout of a bank so that they could get more stable on
Hmm.
their feet and then return the money back to the government. But in order to return the money back, these banks had to cut costs. So the very first
Hmm.
project we got was to work for a bank cutting costs. Not the most exciting,
Wow.
not the most exciting kind of work to do, but something that was very needed. And
Yeah.
that project went very well. And ever since then, in 2008, all the way until today, we've been continuing to do project work, but we've changed the story, we've changed the focus. We now do things that are more exciting, like helping businesses grow, helping companies get into new markets, launch new products, invest in new opportunities, improve their performance. So a lot more positive, forward-thinking, type project work. Uh, and
Hmm.
one thing we mentioned earlier, we're not just like any other consulting firm that might hire a bunch of really newly minted undergrads out of college and say, okay, now go solve the world's problems. All of
Hmm.
our team members are more experienced, and we've had sort of grit under our nails because we actually had to run some businesses and get into the operations of things, and we bring that to bear. And so
Hmm.
slightly different in that sense. So we'll go and work with a company like WWE or with you, and essentially can speak from experience as opposed to just speaking from intellectual philosophy of how you should run a business. No, we've actually done these things, and so we can help you, do the same for your company. And we also understand that certain things are really hard to do, and so we're not going to just say go do that. We're going to help you go do that. So
Yeah.
that's kind of how it all came about. It wasn't something that I had planned to do, but thankfully, 2008 was a pivotal year for me, and really
Yeah.
kind of gave birth to it.
Take me back to that day when you're leaving Lehman Brothers with the box, right? Like that's
Yeah.
such an iconic image. I think especially for those of us who remember 2008. But what were some of the things that were going through your mind before you got to this stage of, hey, I think this consulting thing might work out?
So it's interesting. On the day of, I was riding Metro North from Connecticut into the city and checking my BlackBerry. Remember those? Didn't
Yeah.
have iPhones then,
Yes, I do.
BlackBerry. And I got a message from my immediate supervisor saying, when you get in, stop by my office. I want to talk to you about something. And
Oh,
that,
everyone's favorite message to get on the way to work.
right, stop by my office. Okay, so at first I didn't think anything of it, but then as I started thinking, I realized, wait, this is the very first thing he wants me to do in the morning. And so it started as I was walking from Grand Central to the office, I started thinking, okay, this feels like what I heard happened at Merrill and other companies just a few weeks prior.
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
when I got into the office and I saw the mood of the atmosphere of everyone in there, I knew immediately before anything was spoken to me. So that morning, the experience was quite sort of intense. Uh, but the moment I left, which was maybe 2 hours later, with all my belongings
Mhm.
in one box, it's kind of liberating in some respects because I knew now that, okay, I don't know what my future is going to bring, but I know that I'm not doing that anymore. And I
Mhm.
have choices and I have opportunities. Yes, they're scary because there's so much uncertainty. But the one thing that I really got out of it was I can't just rely on a company to be loyal and faithful and say, this is where you should put all of your time and energy because we will always be there for you. No, this one wasn't. So
Yeah.
it really woke me up to say, how do I get a little more control of my life? I don't know day to
Mm.
day how my career is going to go. I'm not planning it out for 30, 40, 50 years, but maybe there's certain things I can do to give me a little more control. And so
Mhm.
that's kind of how I embarked on this. All right, maybe we can actually start a firm and do some professional services work, and I can choose my clients and I can choose how intense I want that work to be. Hopefully making enough money, hopefully having fun at it, but at least I know I'm not just dependent upon, an organization.
Oh my gosh. I think you hit on such an important topic there because I know a lot of people that I talk with today feel that of I've given so much of myself to these organizations and they don't have my back and things have changed so much in the particularly corporate space, but I just think career wide in that you don't go and work for one company and just expect to be there for your whole career. And I think rightfully so, there's a lot of people on the employee side who have almost, I want to use the word resentment and frustration towards, well, why am I going to put myself into this job
Mhm.
so much? But one of the lessons that I hear from what you shared, whether or not when you're leaving, when you're in a job search situation, whether or not you're going to go start your own consultancy or you are going to choose to seek another job, I think one of the things you shared that's so important is that people, we need to each look at our career from an entrepreneurial
Yeah.
perspective, right? And no, nobody is going to take care of us. We work for ourselves regardless of who is paying us. And I think when you can approach job search or opportunity finding with that mindset, with whatever you go and do, it's an incredibly liberating experience, even if starting your own business is not for you.
Yeah.
I think that mindset is very beneficial.
Yeah. And one thing just to, I can imagine some people say, well, that's a lot of risk. How can you take on that risk? But just to give you a little more history here. So um, the very first job I had out of college, so I was a arts and sciences major. I majored in history and international relations. What am I going to do with that? Right. But I thought I was going to
Yeah.
conquer the world. And lo and behold, I actually left and I didn't do anything with it. I actually went into consulting. So I did have a background in consulting. My first job was at a Bain spinoff called Corporate Decisions. Today it's called Oliver Wyman. So I got grounded in the fundamentals of how to be a consultant. Um, did that for a couple of years. I quickly realized that I'm being asked by CEOs and other executives for opinions and advice on things I just didn't understand. Like I didn't understand basic
Mm.
accounting. I never took that in college. I never, I didn't take finance. And there's some certain things, certain base uh, tools that I needed to get. And so I went to business school after doing that initial
Mm.
consulting role. So I went to Yale, and then after that, decided I want to actually build on what I did with consulting, but I didn't want to do just strict consulting. And so I went into
Hmm.
strategic planning, which is essentially internal consulting at a company you choose.
Yeah.
So I went to American Express and stayed there for a while. What I'm illustrating is I didn't just take a risk and just kind of chart a new path or go another way. I wanted to build on something I had already. A, because it was easier to tell the story and I could spin it into an interview and maybe a position. but also B, because you're building on something you know, even if it's not a great experience or something that really challenged you, you know it. You went through it. And so
Yeah.
I took my consulting experience, turned it into strategic planning. That then led me at American Express into starting new ventures for the company and investing in them. And I started to get into private equity and investments. And that's what brought me through a series of other companies. To make a long story short, I went to Citigroup, I worked with two venture capital firms, and then ultimately ended up at Lehman Brothers in investments. So
Hmm.
again, I didn't plot this path out from day one graduating college, but I kind of built on things as I went. And then when Lehman Brothers finally closed, and I said, I want to start a consulting firm, I actually was going back to something I knew already. It wasn't just,
Hmm.
let me just pick something out of thin air and try it. It was,
Yeah.
how do I take something I've done and give myself that sort of independence and ability to control my life a little bit? So I think
Yeah.
always looking backwards and picking on something you've done, no matter where it's from, and using that as the springboard for the next thing is really the way you can get more confidence and self-assurance when you're doing it, but also building something you know.
I absolutely love that. It almost feels like a Venn diagram, right? It's like there's where you are now, there's where you want to be eventually. Where do the two overlap?
Mhm.
And that's your next step, right? You might not be able to go from point A to point B in one jump,
Yep.
but where can you how can you leverage the experience you have to get your next experience to lead to the next experience?
Yeah.
That I think that's
There's
such an
always going to be
important way to
some
think
risk
about
in
it.
that, but you can
Yeah.
de-risk it a little by pulling on something in your Venn diagram that you already experienced and know how to do or can at least talk to
Yeah. Did you ever encounter imposter syndrome throughout your
all the
career at any
time.
point?
All the
Talk to me about that.
time.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, well, certainly when I was right out of college and I was my first few years as a consultant being asked, what do I think about the balance sheet of the company and what's the balance sheet? I don't even know. Let me tell you what I think about the balance sheet of the company. Yes, I definitely experienced it
Yeah.
then. And I think as you go further and further along in your career, you get into higher positions of leadership and managerial authority and all that. I think it's just human nature, right? Even if you were the
Mhm.
best at what you do, the world changes. And if you're not always thinking about, okay, what's the change that I now have to keep up with? You're going to feel like
Mhm.
I'm not necessarily the best person to ask about that, or how did I end up in this seat, you know, in something that's actually shifting underneath me? Like you're always going to feel that, but I don't
Yeah.
think that's bad. I think that's something you just have to acknowledge and then use it as a incentive to try to sit back in a quiet room away from everybody and figure out, okay, how do I strengthen my confidence in whatever that particular area is?
Yeah.
And sometimes it's just picking yourself up and saying, I can do it, right? You're not going to go get another degree. You're not going to go read another book necessarily, but maybe. But I think just being
Mhm.
able to say, you know what, I've done it this long, I can keep doing this. And a lot of this is just expressing confidence and knowing how to even admit when you don't know something, then that really builds up your or reduces your imposter syndrome feeling.
I know the power of when you reach a point in your career where you can stand behind, you know what, let me get back to you on that,
Yeah.
or I'm not the best person to ask, but I'll find the answer. It in some ways can be interpreted as a weakness, but I think is the most powerful moment.
Mm-hmm.
And you have reached the threshold of being less worried about how other people are going to perceive you and more worried about just being right and getting the truth. And
Yeah.
that's, I think, a real developmental milestone in a career path for sure.
Yeah. And I think that the
Hmm.
people around you who might be asking you these hard questions and giving you that sense of imposter syndrome, if you come back to them and say, you know, let's try to figure that out, or let's break it down, or let's work on this together, or I actually don't know that, but I know how to get the answer. Those kinds of ways of managing the situation, they're going to appreciate that too.
Yeah.
So I
Yeah.
think it's just learning that skill too, to be able to take control and be able to handle it as opposed to faking your way through it or running away, which in some cases we all want to do. Uh,
Yeah.
right. So
I'm
how do you,
I'm completely with you though. I really do feel I did a podcast on imposter syndrome a few episodes back, and I have been really sitting with this revelation that I've had recently of like, I think we've got it wrong in assuming that imposter syndrome is a bad thing. Because if you never have imposter syndrome, are you ever challenging yourself? Like, are you ever pushing yourself to go further than where you are today? I don't know how growth can happen without that feeling of I've gotten over my skis.
Yeah.
It's scary when it happens, but it's almost a sign that you're moving in the right direction.
Yeah. I've gotten to know this professor at where I went to college. And over the last few months, we've been talking about this a little bit because he's a really accomplished, tenured professor, one of the most popular at the university, and yet he feels it. And
Wow.
one of the things that we talked about is certain certain careers or certain disciplines, you're always trying to find the next big thing. So like research, right? You're always wondering,
Mm-hmm.
why does something occur? Let me go try to figure it out. And you're trying to do some discovery. You don't know the answer. And all you
Mm-hmm.
know though is sort of method to try to find the answer or questions to ask or trying to stay curious and keep looking for it. But you don't have the answer until the end. And so that breeds imposter syndrome for that particular kind of job. Because like, I don't know the
Wow.
answer.
Yeah.
Am I on the right path? I don't know. Why me? You could just spiral, right? And yet,
Oh my
and
gosh.
yet in that particular example, you have to just acknowledge it and say, no, no, that's part of what this is all about. I'm in a discipline or a career where I'm constantly trying to look for the next thing and I don't know where it's going to come from and I don't know what it is, but
Yeah.
don't question whether you're the right person to look for that.
That is true confidence, right? Like being able to, in the face of the uncertainty, knowing, all right, I don't know the answer, but I'm the right person to find the answer, and that's okay. That takes confidence, and that's, I think, one of the purest definitions of confidence.
Yeah.
Uh, One of the things we talk about a lot on this podcast with coaching clients is this concept of unique value and what you as an individual bring to the clients you work with, the employers that you work for, and how that attribute and or combination of attributes sets you apart from your competitors. So I describe unique value as kind of this mixture of your strengths, your personal values, and the experiences that you've had. And all three of those things put together create this unique DNA of who you are and what sets you apart.
Hmm.
I know I'm putting you on the spot here, but when you think about like throughout your career, I imagine you've had to leverage your personal unique value, not only to land clients, but also to make your way through those early parts of your career through that Venn diagram that we were talking about.
Yeah.
What do you think your unique value is that you're bringing?
Oh my. I can give you a list of clients. You can ask them. I don't
Yeah,
know.
there we
I don't
go.
really
We
know.
could do that.
No,
I've got some guesses already.
I mean, it is a question I've asked myself too, because as I'm watching others either give a lecture or handle a meeting or do something, right? I'm admiring what they're doing and I start to see
Yeah.
their unique value. I don't see it in myself as clearly as I see it in someone else. But I don't know. One thing that I hope is true is um, I've been told that I'm resourceful in the sense that I can help break down an ambiguous problem and figure out how to approach it, get some answers, get some more clarity, and leverage any
Hmm.
people or tools that I might have access to. So that's what I mean
Hmm.
by kind of resourceful. Um,
Yeah.
but I also been told that I tend to say less and listen more. And so I think that maybe those two things would be part of my unique value. Um, of course, then imposter syndrome comes in, and I wonder, but put that aside. Um, but I think I definitely do think I try to like figure out situations before I try to answer or speak to the situation.
Yeah.
And then when it comes time to speaking to it or trying to solve something, um, I try to break things down into bite-sized morsels of what we can actually try to solve or accomplish or
Hmm.
figure out. Because a lot of the times, whether it's in business or just any kind of organization, right? you have these amorphous kind of problems and you don't really know where to begin, and you could freeze, right? And so I try to just like, well,
Yeah.
let's take a step back, let's break it down and see where we can get started. And then once you're started, you're moving and things actually start to
Yeah.
have the momentum and you get to the end. So I would put those two things in. I don't know. Do you agree? You've seen me
I was just
in
going to say, to
the,
echo
in the
your
work
point
setting.
of, it's easier to observe others' unique value sometimes than it is to self reflect on your own. I would 100% agree with everything you just shared as being part of your unique value. I think those are all things that really stand out as someone who's had the pleasure of getting to work with you. And there's such importance in being able to reflect and articulate those things in ourselves. How do you utilize that kind of self-awareness when you are trying to connect with clients or connect with your network more broadly?
Um, so if it's somebody I know, then it's easier, right? Because I think they may have seen some of that,
Mhm.
but I do meet new people all the time, or I'm referred from one person I know to another person. And I guess I just try to not let the situation make me nervous and treat any
Mm.
new interaction or meeting somebody or dealing with an abstract problem as um, almost like a puzzle that you're doing with a friend and you're trying to figure it out together, right? I know that
Yeah.
all the settings are different. You can have very tense interactions with people. You can have very challenging kind of environments. You can have big age differences. There's a lot of stuff that can get in the way and create noise. But fundamentally, we're just people. And so I just try to engage with somebody as if we're, I want to say, equals or colleagues working together towards a common goal. And it kind of,
Mhm.
for me at least, it reduces the stress, it reduces the tension that I might feel, and it becomes more of an opportunity where I can just be myself and listen to
Mhm.
them and try to give them uh, thoughts that will help again break down an issue into something that's smaller. And so I don't know, it doesn't always work, but that's at least how I try to do this. So for example, just to give you another example, I was last week I was in a room full of maybe 60 people, all of whom were highly accomplished in their particular fields. And we were an advisory board to an individual. The individual was asking questions, and you just get silence in the room because I think everyone was immediately trying to size up, okay, who's going to be the first to speak? And what am I going to say? What are you going to say? And that
Oof.
sort of tension you can just feel, right? When I just said it right there, you can probably feel it. You want to
Yeah.
try to find a way to ignore the tension because if you just think about the tension, you're never going to think about, well, what am I going to say or how am I going to say it or how am I going to engage with these people? You're just focused on the wrong thing. So
Yeah.
very quickly, once some people started saying a few things, I added to the conversation, and now you're in it, and now it's moving, and you feel like that tension kind of like disappears, right?
Mhm.
In that scenario or that situation, I realized just trying to ignore the things that are giving you kind of a sense of, I don't know, inferiority or nervousness. Just try to ignore that particular
Mhm.
feeling and focus instead on, let me just say something and just get going on this process and start engaging with these people because we're all people again. Just get going. And that breaks it down for me. So that's kind of how I deal with it and try to bring my, my style to something.
I love that. And I love how you actually like utilize your unique value in these conversations. So you're not just talking about it, you're showing it even
Yeah.
in your initial interactions with people, which I think is a phenomenal tactic, to be, I mean, sounds so meticulous to call it a tactic. I think it becomes more second nature.
Yeah.
But when you're really grounded in your unique value, it becomes such a part of who you are that it becomes not only the topic of the conversation, but it drives the actual conversation.
And the interesting thing is, in that
Mhm.
case that I just gave you, every single person was probably thinking the exact same thing I was. Oh my God, am I
Yeah.
going to be the first one to speak? What am I going to say? What's this person going to say? Right? You're not alone.
Yeah.
You're not the only one in that room feeling that. And that's probably in whatever the situation that you're in, very similar, that everyone's feeling the same thing. Even if it's just a one on one conversation, that person's probably thinking, how do I get to know you? How do I impress you? So just acknowledging that this is something that we're all feeling and using your kind of
Yeah.
unique value to try to break through or, you know, I think that will help a lot with just all of us dealing with, again, I'll bring it back to like, sort of an inferiority or imposter syndrome kind of circumstance.
100%. I tell people all the time, you have just as much to give as you have to gain. Half the time, we just don't know how to articulate it, or we
Yeah.
haven't sat down long enough to really define it for ourselves. And that can be a huge turning point in our career because we're always going to have these moments where we're feeling inferior, we're
Yeah.
feeling the imposter syndrome. Um,
And can
but
I
I
just add
think
too, like I
being,
think one thing that
yeah,
one thing that's interesting too is I think the most successful people that I've observed have fun at what they're doing. And I don't mean just like making light and jokey about everything. I mean, they actually are enjoying what they're doing and um, making others in the room enjoy it as well because they're sort of setting the tone and, you know, everyone sort of feeds on each other in that sense. Those are the people I see in whatever circumstance as being very successful. And
I love
I
that.
try to do that too. It's not always easy
Mhm.
if you're certainly if you're like puzzling over a really hard problem, like how do I have fun doing this? But you try to make it a little bit more lighthearted in some sense so that it's not just, you know, dull, very stressful, right?
Yeah.
Weight of the world on your shoulders. Like that's where I think a lot of us tend to go. Try to like lift up from that.
I love that. And I think it's like letting your unique value be your compass to the type of work that you should be doing.
Mhm.
Because, I mean, there's just some types of work that could be amazingly fun for some people, could be watching paint dry for other people,
Yeah,
right? Like,
right.
I mean, Daryl, I've worked on a PowerPoint with you at like
Yep.
7:30 at night trying to solve a problem and had like the best time. And maybe we're nuts, I don't know, but
Lining up the lines
it,
in the boxes. I mean, come on, we're nuts.
yeah, exactly, exactly. And trying to figure out, okay, how do we break this down in a way that it's going to make sense?
Yeah.
Um, I think we both share personalities that find joy in that. Where there are people who would think we are crazy for finding joy in that, but the challenge is whatever it is for you, find what that thing is, and then find a way to make money doing it.
Mhm.
I think is a way that I would guess why those people are more successful. It's not just that they're having fun in doing what they're doing, it's that they found the thing that allows them to have fun.
Yeah. And they're getting more out
Mhm.
of it than just career success. They're getting actually
Yeah,
they're not just enjoying the end game, they're enjoying the process of getting through it, right? Because it's
100%.
something they really like. Hopefully.
Yeah. Yeah. So, do you love what you do today?
Yeah, I do. I mean, for so many reasons, one of which is just that I see so many different projects and people and companies, that by the nature of consulting, you're always working on something new. And even if it's
Mhm.
the same company, like when we were working together at WWE, we did 30 some projects together,
Yep.
all
Yes, we
different.
sure did.
Um,
Yeah.
but, switching gears and working on different clients in different industries, I would not see this level of variety just working in, well, certainly Lehman Brothers or working in one company, for
Hmm.
the same period of time. So
Hmm.
the one thing I love is the variety. The other thing I love is
Yeah.
actually helping create things. So, okay, some people say, well, if you want to leave a legacy, you should build a building or you should like engineer something, and then there's a thing, right? There's an actual thing. Yeah, but there's also a thing when you create a company or you create a product in the company, or you know, if you remember, one of the things that we did when we were working with WWE was to launch the XFL. And to me,
Yeah.
that was hugely exciting because we're creating something that will touch thousands of people, right? Give them joy, but also create an opportunity for more football players, more media coverage, more and more everything. It was just actually creating something from scratch, nothing. It didn't exist.
Hmm.
Um,
Yeah.
so to me, I get the reward out of building and launching something brand new that other people can experience. So I see that all the time in what I do now. It's not all the scale of the XFL necessarily, but you know, products, services, businesses, all of that.
Yeah. You're getting to create something that wasn't there before,
Yeah,
which is so much, there's so much joy in that.
that's right. Yeah.
I've got one more question for you, Daryl, and that
Yeah.
is, you I think that what I love about your Lehman Brothers story that you shared with us is that you took something that was, I mean, life quite literally gave you lemons, right? Like
Yeah.
that is a really rough situation, and you were able to make lemonade out of them. You found a path that allowed you to be successful and get you where you are today. A lot of our listeners might be in different parts of their career path, and some of them may be in a place right now where they are very much in the lemons, right?
Hmm.
And contemplating what to do next, where to go from here. What advice do you have for people, either around their mindset or some actions that they can take if they find themselves in a period of career transition right now?
Yeah. So that's a great question. And you know, there's always the skepticism, I think. Even I had it. I still have it sometimes when I hear of, oh, well, if you just try this, it'll work. It's great. Not always, right? And probably
Mm-hmm.
majority of the time it's not a straight line. You're gonna try something many, many times and maybe it'll then take. So what I would say is if you're in a situation where you're among all the lemons and you need to get out of this sour situation, you're not alone, right? I think that's something we have to remember a lot. There's
Yeah.
people around you who are also thinking about what else they could do. And maybe you should just spend time with those individuals, friends, colleagues, people we meet on, through different organizations. Try to find people who you could talk about ideas with, and maybe they'll want to do it with you. Then you're
Mm-hmm.
truly not alone, right? You could start
Yeah.
something with somebody or with other people, or you could have a conversation with somebody and they might become your first client or customer, or they might become somebody that is a junior person to you who can give you more leverage and help you do what you want to do next. You just don't know. So when I started Silver Ridge, I think I mentioned the very first thing I did was I called up all my former friends and colleagues who were in similar situations and said, now what? Not because I wanted to start a consulting firm with them, but because I was like, okay, they're in the same circumstance. Let me go
Yeah.
talk to them because they're experiencing it too. And
Mm-hmm.
through those conversations, very quickly we got to the what can we do about it? Hey, we have similar experience with consulting. Let's try this out. Let's do it together. It's shared risk. I'm not in this alone. And it for me, it kind of built some momentum and it made it more not acceptable, but just easier to do, right? As opposed to
Mm-hmm.
me saying, I'm just going to dwell on this myself and figure out myself what am I going to do, and then let me see if I can just hang up a shingle on my own. That
Yeah.
that that's a lot harder to do, and you don't have the mentorship of your peers. You don't have the collegiality and other people kind of you know rooting for you and working together on it. I think if you spend time with people you know and explore what your options are, even if they're crazy ideas, that's a lot better than just trying to sit down and think about it on yourself on your own. Um,
Yeah.
So, your networking sessions, for example, are great places to
Yes.
do that. I mean, we
Mhm.
should talk after this, but there were some conversations that occurred during that when I went to one that have carried on since. So, did I go
Oh
to the
my gosh, I'm
session?
so happy to hear that.
Yeah, it proved it out. Did I go to the session thinking that was going to happen? No, but that's what happens. So, if you're in a circumstance where you're trying to get some lemonade out of lemons, I think you should try to talk to as many people as you can. Just simple as that. And be
Yeah.
vulnerable, talk about what you're thinking, talk about what you would like to do in your future, and just see where it goes. Because you
Mhm.
really just never know.
Oh, you're so right. And I so believe in the power of networking from the perspective of how you described it, of you don't go in looking for something. You're just connecting with people for the joy of connecting with them. And you never know what that next conversation is going to hold. And action breeds opportunity.
Mhm.
And I think one of the most valuable actions you can take is connecting with people.
Yeah.
Talk to them, meet with them, be open to helping them as much as they're open to helping you, or even more so. And opportunity will grow
Yeah.
the more that you are out there talking to people.
And it takes energy. It's difficult. You got to pick yourself up. You got to
Yes.
do it. Put yourself out there. You might, I'm more of an introvert, but I do it. And you find that because you do it and you see that it goes somewhere, that's the reward. And that encourages you to do it again and again and again. Believe me, trust me,
Yeah,
it does. It does work, right? So
it
pick yourself
does.
up and get
And
out there.
it can feel like you're planting seeds that aren't going anywhere, and then all of a sudden 3 6, and you know this
Yeah.
in consulting business development better than anyone.
Yeah.
All of a sudden you've got a garden in the backyard and you're like, how did this happen? And
Absolutely.
it was just from that perseverance.
Right. In fact, some of our clients are actually friends. It just, I wasn't selling them a project. It's just because I know them and they know me and it just kind of worked out. So you just don't know where things are going to come from. Yeah.
So true.
And you get to
Daryl,
meet great
thank you
people like
so much.
Kelly that you can stay in touch with over these many, many years.
Oh my gosh. I know. I cannot believe it's been almost 10 years.
Yeah.
I almost fell out of my chair when you told me that. That's
Yeah.
crazy.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. Well, thank you so much for coming on the podcast today.
Pleasure.
Absolutely, I could just listen to your career story all day long. This is how I know I'm in the right line of work, because I completely geek out hearing about how other people found their way to loving what they do so much today. So thank you for joining us. But for folks who want to know more about Silver Ridge
Yeah.
or working with you, where can they find you?
So I'm on LinkedIn, very easy to find. You can message me there, or on our website, silveradgeadvisors.com. There's a form you can just fill out, and you can reach me through that as well. So I'm happy to talk and share some more experiences, and go from there.
Yeah, and I will include all of that information in the caption of this podcast. So if any of our listeners are looking to connect with you, all they have to do is scroll down. They can click that link to LinkedIn. But Daryl, thank you so much. This was so much fun.
Yeah, I enjoyed it too. Thank you, Kelly. Really, really appreciate it.
Thanks for joining me on today's episode. As always, if you're looking for coaching, support, or would like to submit a question, you can drop me an email at info@yourplaceatthetop.com. And if you enjoyed today's episode, don't forget to subscribe, share, and leave a review so this podcast can find its way to other amazing listeners just like you.